was the guy at 28 years old standing behind the one-way glass, really thinking I was fabulous because I had a Rolex watch and I drove a BMW and I had a grand piano in my New York City apartment. That was what life looked like on the outside. On the inside, I was just so deeply unhappy.
What drives someone to walk away from a glamorous life to pursue a mission of compassion? For Scott Harrison, founder and CEO of Charity Water, it was a moment of reckoning.
I was in South America, in Punta del Este, on this amazing opulent vacation. I hated all of it and I wanted a massive change. I get this idea that I'm gonna start life over at 28. I'm gonna sell everything I own and I'm gonna go volunteer on a humanitarian mission in the poorest country in the world.
You went all the way in.
I went all the way in.
After a decade promoting Manhattan's biggest parties, Scott's life took an unexpected turn.
My mother walked across her bedroom and collapsed unconscious on the floor. That is really when I discovered why so many people were sick. Half of the people were drinking dirty water. 100% of the people listening right now have never experienced dirty water.
Scott's mission has now provided millions in developing countries with access to safe drinking water. In this episode, Scott opens up about the moment that changed everything, how he transformed his skills in nightlife into a global movement for clean water.
I knew exactly what I wanted to achieve in life. That would be to try to bring clean water to every human being on planet Earth before I died.
Welcome to Success Story. I'm your host, Scott Clary. The Success Story podcast is part of the HubSpot podcast network. I'm also a big user of HubSpot products. They've supported the show for over 3 years now. And for all entrepreneurs out there, I need you to go back to a time and place when building businesses, as tough as it is, can be sometimes a little bit fun. When you're marketing, it should be fun. But marketing is not so fun anymore because it's very time consuming, it's very difficult, and it feels like there's just a lot of friction. Content was simpler to make, leads were easier to capture, and we weren't all spread so thin. As marketers, as entrepreneurs, the bottom line is that marketing used to be fun. It's not so fun anymore. But with HubSpot's newly launched marketing and content hubs, I've been using it myself, it brings a little bit of fun and creativity back into marketing for your business. You're going to generate better content, you're going to generate more leads, and next level results, which really make marketing fun again. So with tools like Content Remix, you can turn existing assets into all new pieces with just one click. Lead scoring helps you shine a light on the leads that are most likely to purchase, and analytics suites they built out will help you with reports, KPIs, and just a gold mine of AI-powered insights. It's quick to get your results, it's easy to use, it connects all your teams and your data, so put the fun back into your marketing funnel with HubSpot. Visit HubSpot.com to get started for free. Scott, I'm very excited to do this. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate you. So I want to ask a question about sort of your origin story. And I know that some people have heard it, some people may have not. And I think it's important because it really shapes who you are as a person. And you've gone through so many different seasons of your life. But think back, what would be, out of all the different inflection points or very notable moments in your life that sort of set you on the path to where you're at today? And, we just spoke before we pressed record, over $1 billion, which is congratulations for Charity Water. That's fabulous. But going way back, obviously you didn't really understand where this was going to go in the beginning. So what was that inflection point sort of pushed you down the path that you're on today?
I like to use the word seasons. I think there were 3 main seasons of my life. And the first one really began when I was 4 years old, and it was New Year's Day, 1980, and my mother walked across her bedroom and collapsed unconscious on the floor. And this led to a series of blood tests. Was she okay? Why did she pass out? It led to the discovery of massive amounts of carbon monoxide in her bloodstream. And it led to the discovery of a gas leak in the basement of our home that we had just purchased. And she was kind of the canary in the coal mine, so to speak, which saved us all from dying. And my dad and I wound up bouncing back after the heater was ripped out and replaced, but she never did. So from that moment on, she became permanently disabled. She became an invalid. And my I guess what would have been a pretty idyllic childhood, or was on the path to that, was really interrupted where I became a caregiver at a very young age. And mom, what happened to her was her immune system irreparably shut down and was unable to process anything chemical from that point. So you name it, and it made her sick, whether it was car fumes or soap or perfume or fabric softener or the ink from a book. The print would make her sick. So she very quickly moved into an isolated life, living in special rooms that had been covered with aluminum foil, connected to oxygen tanks, wearing masks. And my mom just kind of disappeared. And I became really in charge of helping her survive, helping her with the cooking, helping with the cleaning, helping to run the house. Later, as I got older, helping to accompany her to doctor's visits, and then eventually, take her to some of them. So the big family that my parents hoped to have never materialized. My mom miscarried what would have been my sister, and I was an only child. And I grew up in a really conservative Christian home with two parents who loved each other, but a very, very sick mom. And I wanted to be a doctor when I grew up. So I was going to cure my mom, and I was going to cure other sick people that I'd met with her similar condition, which just confounded the medical science of the day. I didn't smoke, I didn't drink, I didn't cuss, I didn't sleep around. I played by the rules of the church and was a really, really good kid. That was season 1. Then there was an inflection point that began season 2, where instead of becoming a doctor, I decided actually I was going to move to New York City and do all of those things that I said I was not doing before. I did want to smoke, and I did want to drink, and I did want to sleep around, and I did want to swear, and I did want to kind of experience life outside the rules, outside of the somber tone that was really, a part of our house. And I remember going to a club in New York City called, it was actually not Tunnel. Club USA, it was called. And I remember going down the slide from the balcony and kind of emerging on the dance floor surrounded by 1,000 people at 18 years old. And I just said, this is what I want. This is what I want. I want to be surrounded by 1,000 people who are partying and drinking and having sex and doing drugs. This is my childhood. I'm going to experience my childhood. And that led to a 10-year season where I actually became a nightclub promoter. So I liked the club so much, I wanted to actually run the club.
Went all the way in.
Yeah. I went all the way in. And I learned, man, if you want to rebel in style, there's probably no better job in New York City than to fill up nightclubs full of beautiful, rich, famous people and charge them $30 a cocktail or $1,000 a bottle of champagne to sit in the right chair at the right table. So over the next 10 years, really to the horror of my parents, their virginal, pure, wannabe doctor kid, is climbing up New York City's nightlife ladder, spraying champagne out of DJ booths and, doing coke and ecstasy and MDMA and smoking 2 packs of Marlboro Reds a day and gambling and going to strip clubs and, addicted to porn and, all the things that kind of go with
you didn't leave anything out.
I didn't leave anything out. I left heroin out. That's it.
Oh, good.
And, I became pretty good at it. So I climbed up to the top of that food chain, and I was the guy at 28 years old standing behind the one-way glass, deciding who got into the club and who got to sit where, and booking DJs from Paris or Milan, and really thinking I was fabulous because I had a Rolex watch and I drove a BMW and I had a grand piano in my New York City apartment, and my girlfriend was on the cover of fashion magazines, and I had arrived. And that was what life looked like on the outside. On the inside, I was one of the most unhappy, soulless, sycophantic, damaged people that I knew. And I was just so deeply unhappy with the shape of my life. And it took me 10 years, unfortunately, to reach that point. But I realized, hey, I'd become slowly and then suddenly the worst person that I knew. And if I died at 28 years old, the only thing I could imagine someone would write on my tombstone is, here lies a club brat that got 1 million people wasted. I'd contributed absolutely nothing positive to society. And, I had this kind of, another cathartic moment, which started season 3 of my life, where I was in South America, in Punta del Este, on this amazing opulent vacation. And I hated all of it. And I wanted a massive change. And I realized that a pivot was not in order. It was a 180-degree change that was needed. Go basically try and think the opposite, say the opposite, do the 180-degree opposite of everything I'd been doing for 10 years and see where that would take me. And in some ways, I wanted to come back home. I missed the foundation of morality and spirituality and purity in a way that my parents had tried to instill in me. So I get this idea that I'm going to start life over at 28. I'm going to sell everything I own, and I'm going to go volunteer on a humanitarian mission in the poorest country in the world and see where that might take my life. And that really started chapter 3, which we are now still in. And hopefully I will end in this chapter or this season.
Why do you think you went through such dramatic 180s in your life? I'm assuming your mom's condition had something to do with it, because I think that and I try and place myself as a kid in that situation, turning into the role of a caregiver, it's almost like too much responsibility. It was good for a moment. You felt duty to your family. You raised up a good kid, religious ideals and what good is, I think no drinking, no drugs, no partying, no nothing. And then added responsibility. It's almost like you were like in this pressure cooker situation, and then you just went the opposite direction.
I think that's a great way of describing it. I mean, it was just rebellion. I want to reject the rules. I want to reject not fun. A life of service felt not fun. It felt like it was about others, and it's me time. I want to have a childhood. I want to go have fun. My friends were out playing with their parents, and I was doing unfun stuff, I thought.
I mean, I was some of the stuff that you had to do for your mom. There's stories of you having to, so correct me if I'm wrong, but you had to bake the books to remove the smell, or I guess the scent of the ink, the chemical, and then you had to wrap them in plastic, and then there's a whole. There were
rituals, for mom.
Yeah, a whole bunch of rituals.
The ink would have to outgas, and we would do that in the oven, or we would lay it out in the backyard in the sun, and then I would bring the book up to her tinfoil covered bathroom that had been. The walls had been washed with baking soda. Her cot had been washed 20 times with baking soda. She would open up the door with a mask on. I would hand her the book. She would have gloves on, and she would put the book inside a cellophane bag, and that was her reading ritual. So it was weird stuff. I mean, it was really bizarre.
But you keep seeking purpose. Like throughout your life, you keep seeking purpose, and even in that second season. So I've heard you speak about how you were always trying things that would be considered addictive. So like drugs, alcohol, gambling, women. You would you try these things for a period of time, but then you'd get bored and you'd shut off and you'd go on to the next thing. And it was always about seeking purpose. And I'm curious how, after seeking purpose in all these, traditional vices, how none of it paid off and none of it really gave you what you needed. What prompted you to do that 180 where you realized, okay, outside, if somebody's from the outside looking in, life looks great. Life looks like I'm fun, I'm king shit, I have a hot girl, I have influence, whatever. But what was that point that you realized that all these vices that you were trying to find purpose in were not really doing it?
Yeah, well, in many ways, it was a spiritual awakening. So I hit that kind of moment in South America where I just remember it was almost like the game of musical chairs. And for the first time, the music stopped and I had nowhere to sit down. It was a jarring existential moment where I think if I put it in a sentence, I realized there will never be enough. Someone will always have more. And I was actually surrounded with people who had more, who had planes, who had, yachts, and they seemed unhappy too. So this endless pursuit of more would never bring the happiness. And so what is the opposite of that? The self-serving. So I looked to God, and I remember reading the Bible again and rediscovering that faith as a 28-year-old without it being shoved down my throat, without being told what I must believe. I remember just thinking like, well, Jesus is kind of badass. He's not religious. In fact, he was raging against so much of the religious establishment of the day. And, he was really all about service, pouring your life out for others so that others could flourish, so that others could benefit. I remember coming across this book this verse in the book of James where it said, if you care about true religion is this: look after widows and orphans and just keep yourself from being polluted. I'm like, I'm friggin' over too. I mean, I have done nothing to look after anyone in the widow and orphan category. And not only am I polluted, I actually pollute others for a living. And the more people I pollute in my clubs, the more money I make. So it was a lot of these things happening, kind of reaching the end of rope, realizing this would not make me happy, kind of coming back to this lost faith in spirituality, morality, and then just needing an idea, which was actually, went back to this concept of the tithe. When my parents were growing up, they would always give 10% of whatever they made to the church. And I was like, well, what if I tithed time? I just blew 10 years. What if I gave one of the 10 years in service and just saw where that would take me? And, interestingly, it was almost impossible to volunteer. And so I remember applying to the first 10 humanitarian organizations, from the Red Cross to World Vision to Save the Children. And, nobody wanted a nightclub promoter. These are serious, Doctors Without Borders, it turns out, wants doctors to join their mission, not club rats. So it became incredibly frustrating because I now had the desire to try something different, to serve, and nobody would take me. And then I was very fortunate that, I call it the 11th organization, wrote me back and said, hey, if you're willing to pay us $500 a month, and if you're willing to go live in the poorest country in the world, you can join our mission. And I just remember thinking, that is really the opposite of my life. Going from clubs and Cristal champagne to a post-war country in West Africa and actually having to pay money to be of service.
What was the organization? And is that how, outside of all the ones you apply to, is that how they operate? They actually get you to pay?
They do. You're
That's subsidizing.
How they fundraise. Exactly. It's a brilliant model. They're called Mercy Ships. They sail now a couple hospital ships up and down the coast of Africa. Very simple ideas. Let's recruit the best doctors and surgeons from around the world. Let's invite them, on effectively a cruise liner that had been converted into the state-of-the-art floating hospital. And then let's sail up and down the coast of Africa, pull into port, and offer free life-changing surgeries to people who can never afford them and who don't even have the medical facilities in their country. So what I joined as was the volunteer photojournalist for this.
Well, I was going to say, what was a nightclub promoter going to do on these boats?
And this is kind of funny because I was not technically a photojournalist, but I was a pretty good writer and I was a pretty good photographer. So I put up a blog with some of the stuff I'd written, and I put up some of my hobby photographs, in fashion and beautiful buildings in Prague and Paris. And I don't even think I realized it at the time, but I was in so many ways uniquely qualified for this job because I brought with me a guest list of 15,000 people who I had emails of because I'd gotten them drunk over the last 10 years. So here I land as kind of the storyteller through pictures and words in West Africa for this medical ship. And I get to work, bombarding the 15,000 people that a few weeks earlier I had been inviting to come get drunk And I start sharing photos of cleft lip surgeries and cleft palates and tumors being removed and cataracts being removed and people getting their sight for the first time. And I was so in awe of the work of these compassionate doctors who, like me, had flown into West Africa to pay, which all that money, like you said, helped the organization run. And I'm just blitzing my list. And, of course, there were some unsubscribes at first. People didn't sign up for, facial tumors in Africa being removed. But after that first wave, the list actually began to grow as people would forward these stories to their friends. And then they began to send money. And I started to realize maybe the same skills that I had developed, filling up 40 different nightclubs over 10 years, throwing the party. These skills could be used in a compassionate, redemptive way to actually save people's lives. And I wound up raising a lot of money for Mercy Ships that first year, raising a lot of awareness. And then when that year ended, I just didn't know what was next. So I just went back to Liberia for a second year. And that is really when I discovered why so many people were sick. And just to give you an example, our third day on this mission, I remember waking up at 5 a.m, putting on hospital scrubs and jumping in this convoy of Land Rovers with doctors and surgeons and nurses. And I had 2 Nikon D1X cameras around my neck. And I learned that we're going to the patient screening. And this is where we receive all of the people who have heard about the coming of our doctors. It's kind of like a cattle call. It's like a big casting. It's an audition for surgery. And I knew we had 1,500 available surgery slots to fill. We could hand out 1,500 surgery cards. And I remember just thinking, is it possible that there's 1,500 people who need facial surgery or cleft lips or eye surgery? And it turns out the government had given us the soccer stadium, the football stadium in the center of the city to triage these patients. And as we approached the stadium, I'll never forget, there were more than 5,000 people standing in the parking lot, waiting for our doctors to arrive, open the doors, and begin screening. And that hit me really hard, realizing, oh my gosh, we're going to send 3,500 sick people home, 3,500 people with deformities because we just don't have enough doctors. We don't have enough time here in this country. And, it was a really, really hard thing. I learned later that many of these people had walked for more than a month. Some of them had come from neighboring countries with their children, walking for a month just in the hope of getting their child to see a surgeon. And we didn't have enough of them. So the first year was a lot of both sadness around the people we couldn't help, but then also learning the skill of focusing on the hope and focusing on the people who we could help and telling their stories, and hoping that by telling their stories, more people would want to contribute, more people would want to send money for surgeries. We could expand the capacity of the work and hopefully one day reach all 5,000 people. The second year was going into the villages and seeing how people were living in one of the poorest countries in the world. And I learned something very, very simple. Half of the people were drinking dirty water. Half of the people in the country were drinking from open swamps and ponds and muddy rivers. And I learned that half of the disease in the country, according to the World Health Organization, was waterborne. And in the second year, so now I'm 29 years old, I'm back in Liberia. I just kind of feel like I have found the thing that I want to work on. Why not jump to the root cause of so much of this sickness? And for me, that was dirty water. And I finished that tour and I came back to New York City at 30 years old, completely broke. Found myself actually $30,000 in debt because my club partner had not dissolved the business like he said he was going to do, nor had he paid taxes. So I had a big tax bill, but I knew exactly what I wanted to achieve in life, and that would be to try to bring clean water to every human being on planet Earth before I died.
A big shout out to HubSpot and the HubSpot Podcast Network for sponsoring Success Story. If you enjoy Success Story, you're going to enjoy a ton of podcasts brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network, including Hustle and Flowchart, hosted by Joey Fear. The Hustle and Flowchart podcast with Joey is all about how to build a business so it gives you the freedom and fuel for your life. You're going to join Joey as he discusses systems, mindset tweaks, reframes, and strategies for entrepreneurs and really anyone to enjoy the process of being in business and having fun. This isn't for entrepreneurs looking to build a billion-dollar business. It's for somebody who wants to build a lifestyle, somebody who is looking to build systems that work. Listen to Hustle and Flowchart wherever you get your podcasts. When you go through this, I guess, metamorphosis as a person, I believe a couple things. I just listening to your story, these are things that I believe to be true. I believe that, firstly, even if people do not believe in God, and this is not a religious podcast by any means, but people do not believe in God, they find God in other things and other vices. So I think that that's a big issue with society. But then and I'm glad that you sort of went through that process and you tried all these different versions of quote unquote God, and then you found sort of what I do believe that most people aspire to be at some point, which is serving other people. I think that I'm very fortunate, kind of like in your position. I have conversations with a lot of people that are very wealthy and successful, and I'm like 9 figures, $100 million plus exits, $500 million. I've spoken to billionaires, and there's really no money makes life easier, but it doesn't help you find fulfillment.
Yeah,
and I think
it doesn't provide meaning or purpose for sure.
No, it doesn't. And you're very fortunate because you didn't have to spend your whole life going through this rat race of trying to make more money. It's almost like you drank from the fire hose of vices, and then you realize that none of it means anything. And then that's what allowed you to see what actual fulfillment is, which is, I think, serving humanity and serving people.
Yeah, I mean, not to go back to the biblical parable, but I remember that story growing up of the prodigal son who had everything and his dad loved him, and he's like, screw you, Dad. I hope you're dead. Give me my money now. And then he freaking just lives large. He parties and it's girls and it's whatever the version back then of was fast cars, and at the end of that story, he winds up somehow completely broke and in a pig pen. He's like, this sucks. I want to go home. Home was way better. But, he had to go through that process, I think, to appreciate his father, his home. And I think, in that, what's great about that story is there's grace and gets kind of walk back in the door as if nothing ever happened. And I think, if that life would play out really, really well, having seen the proverbial pig pen. And I think I got there. I know what the darkness looks like. I know I've met lots and lots of really unhappy rich people. I've seen a lot of broken marriages, and, it might look, when you're 65 and you sell your company and then you start dating somebody younger than your daughter, that might be fun for a few minutes to have a 21-year-old girl. But I've seen that does not bring, human flourishing. It doesn't typically.
No, I agree with you. It doesn't typically. And I've seen a lot of unhappy people with a lot of money that have divorced, had broken homes. Again, date people that are younger than their daughter. And then they're trying to find purpose, and they're trying to find fulfillment and trying to find meaning.
And listen, we've also seen, just to stay on this topic, because we've seen so many times someone work so hard and build a company and build real value and build something that's world-class, and then have that exit and then go play, right? And then now everything is possible. And I can't tell you how many people 2 or 3 years later I talk to, and they're bored. They want to start something else. You can't just play. You can't find purpose in spending money and traveling and buying boats and cars and taking, the vacations that you could never have afforded to take and you dreamed about. You're sitting there in St. Bart's in a 2,000 euro suite saying, if I freaking do it, what am I contributing? What am I building? What value am I adding? So, I've tried to invite a lot of people to just experience generosity and giving. And, there is a lot of meaning to be found through giving and asking yourself the question, is it my time? Is it my talent and mentorship? Is it my money? Is it all three? And a lot of people just never exercised that muscle before.
What did you discover about yourself during those 2 years?
Well, I loved it. I mean, I can't tell you. I mean, I think the best year of my life was that first year on the Mercy ship. I will say I quit everything. I said, I'm never going to smoke again. I'm never going to touch drugs again. I'm never going to gamble again. Never setting foot in a strip club. I'm never going to look at a pornographic image again as long as I live. I quit drinking for a long time. Now I drink a little bit, but I really wanted to walk away from that life of vice. And there was something so symbolic of walking up the gangway of a 522-foot hospital ship and sailing away to a new continent and a new life. Like, this idea of leave the vice on land and put an ocean between that. And, I've been really fortunate to have not gone back. I think the other thing that helped immediately was my community instantly changed. I don't think I could have quit smoking and hung out in the clubs. I don't think I could have quit drugs and all that other stuff and still been in my old environment. But now I'm with a bunch of doctors. Like, it's not really cool to smoke in a hospital.
No,
you're not banging ecstasy, on a hospital ship, when everybody goes to bed at 9 o'clock and wakes up at 5, to start prepping the OR. So I loved it, man. I loved this new environment. I loved the wholesomeness of it, the intention of people to serve. How can we help? How can we be useful? How can we take what we have been given and share it with others? It was magical. I mean, it was in such stark contrast to my life and the environment that I was creating, the environment I was living in, just weeks before.
When you sort of went on this 2-year journey, you mentioned one point, which is incredibly sad, about those 5,000 people waiting for 1,500 surgery slots. And I was just watching some of your content ahead of time. And if you look outside the US or outside of Western countries, it's some ridiculous stat. I think you listed it in your book, Thirst, about 1 in 50,000 people have access to doctors or medical treatment, but compared to, I don't know what the number is.
1 in 280 or something.
Yeah. So it's insane when you look outside how silly the things that you think are important are really not important at all when you look at the rest of the world. And something as simple as providing clean water, it seems like there are so many organizations that are already trying to achieve these goals. But when you're telling me the story about what you're seeing, boots on the ground, it seems like in certain parts of the world, nothing's improving at all, even though we feel like there's a lot of charity organizations and whatnot, and a lot of people trying to solve these problems. So there's this massive disconnect between our reality in the US, and I'm Canadian, but same difference, and the rest of the world. And I'm just more curious about, why is there this massive disconnect? Because if you ask anybody who's made money, I think a lot of people give to nonprofits. I think a lot of people donate. I think a lot of people want to support organizations. But I don't think that many people realize that 1 in 50,000 people don't have access, or have access to a doctor overseas in some more impoverished parts of the world, or there was no drinking water. I mean, what you're doing, it seems to be a little bit bleeding edge and novel and disruptive in the nonprofit world. So there seems to be a massive disconnect. Why do you think that is?
There's a lot there. Let me maybe just start with, we are making progress. Let me just talk about water. When I started Charity Water 18 years ago, 1.1 billion people were drinking dirty water every day on a 6 billion population. So it was 1 in 6 people alive drinking toxic, poisonous water globally. Now we're down to 703 million. So a lot of progress on a 7 billion plus, close to 8 billion world population. So we've gone from 1 in 6 to 1 in 10. That's significant progress. 400 million people or so. Now, most of that progress was made in cities and towns. And now 82% of the people left on Earth without clean water live in remote rural areas. So now it gets a little harder, right? It's kind of last mile stuff. I think Well, let me say two things. I think, first of all, oh my gosh, I mean, I can, and maybe we will, I mean, I can tell so many stories about water and what I've learned in 18 years. I've been to Africa 55 times now. I've been to 72 countries around the world. The thing is that, I'm gonna round up to 100% of the people listening right now have never experienced dirty water. Let's use your doctor. Let's round up to 100% of the people here listening have never lived in a place where there's no doctor. Water comes out of our taps. It comes out of our refrigerators. We give it to our pets. We put it in golf course. I mean, we were born into a world of water. And every once in a while, we have to turn your sprinklers off because there's a drought, right? But we have never experienced what it's like for that 10% of the world, for the 700 million people. And, if you happen to be living there, if you happen to be born there, you're walking 7 hours a day for dirty water and you're hauling 40 pounds on your back. You're losing your child to diarrhea. Your child is dying of dehydration in your arms because you have poisoned them from a swamp, which is the only source of water you've ever known because it's in the center of your village. And, it requires some storytelling to bring people into these issues and then connect with them and then cause them in some way to reject the apathy that is so easy to accept with any paralyzing global issue and get them to raise their hand and say, I could actually do something about that. You mean to tell me that for $40, I can get one person clean water, or for $10,000, I can pay to drill a well in a village of 250 people? So it requires, it's a little bit of a leap. Now, if I'm talking, I remember doing a big stage talk once, Inc. magazine's Inc. 5000, there were 5,000 people in the room, and I had to follow the CEO of Livestrong at the time. And I remember sitting there and, Doug comes out and he says, all right, raise your hand if you've had cancer. A bunch of hands go up. Okay, raise your hand if you've had a family member with cancer. We're probably at 65% of the audience. Okay, what about a friend or a coworker? He's got 100% of the audience with the hands up. And then he starts his talk. I get out there and say, okay, raise your hand if you're a woman and you were raped on the way to a water hole. Okay, raise your hand if your child died of schistosomiasis or parasites from the water, right? I'm going to get nobody. So I think that's that American philanthropy, right? People think Americans are generous and there's a lot of money that's given. Only 4% of all the money helps people outside the country. 96% of all American giving stays here in the continental U.S. And that's because we experience issues like cancer and cancer research and homelessness. And, we give to our alma mater because we got a great education and that made a lot of things possible. Now, kind of moving on to the other, there is a skepticism and a cynicism as well when it comes to giving to charities. And I think that's why we've been so successful, is because when I started Charity Water, I had just come off the ship after 2 years. I'm in New York City. I don't freaking know anything about how to start a charity or an institutional, agency, humanitarian aid agency. I'm talking to friends that go to clubs and they work at Sephora and Chase Bank and MTV VH1. And my everyday friends are like, man, I don't freaking give to charities. I don't know where that money's going. None of that money I give is actually going to go reach people. It's going to go into overhead. It's going to go into a black hole. So I remember going to, I guess it was Barnes & Noble or Borders or whatever at the time, and buying the yellow Nonprofit for Dummies book, and learning, like, how do I actually do this? I want to give everybody in the world clean water, but how do I do this? And I just had the advantage of not knowing any better, talking to friends, realizing 42% of Americans, polled by USA Today, said they don't trust charities. 70% of Americans believe charities waste their money, their donations. And I just thought, well, what if I try to build the perfect charity that speaks to the objector? What would that perfect charity look like? It would be hyper transparent. Okay, I'm going to build the most transparent charity in the history of the world. It would follow the money. Okay, great. I'm going to build technology that tracks donations down to the final source. 100% of people's money would go straight to the projects. Okay, I'm not sure exactly what that's going to look like, but I'm going to open up 2 separate bank accounts, and I'll raise all that nasty overhead in a separately audited bank account so that 100% of the public's money can go directly to help people get clean water and to build projects, so that people can't use that excuse here. How much of my money goes? The answer would always be 100%. So, this very kind of unique structure began to form with a very clear mission. So I'd be able to tell anybody in an elevator, hey, what are you doing? I'm trying to bring clean water to every human being alive on Earth. And we have a really interesting structure and a way to do that. Do you have $1 to give? Great. 100% will go help somebody get clean water. Do you have $100 million to give? Great. That's going to help a whole lot of people. We know what to do with $100 million, and all of that can go to the field. So, I put those kind of concepts together. I'll say maybe one more thing. As I looked at the charitable sector, I thought the brands sucked. And, in nightclubs, like the club needed a great brand to attract people. You want to go sell a $30, vodka Red Bull that costs you 30 cents. You need a brand to be able to mark that up. And as I looked at charities, I saw a lot of bad websites. I saw a lot of shame and guilt marketing. You're probably old enough to remember the Sally Struthers commercials, and the slow motion kids in Africa, flies landing on their face, the 800 number. And I was just looking around saying, where's the Apple of charities? Where's the Nike? Where's the creative, imaginative, inspiring organization, which is inviting people to become the most compassionate, generous versions of themselves, who's building a movement of health and dignity and hope and human flourishing. And I didn't see it. So I said, I'm going to try and build that. Nick Kristof had written in the New York Times this great line. He says, toothpaste is peddled with far more sophistication than all the world's life-saving causes. So why is it that Colgate is better at marketing than Save the Children or, any noble cause that is trying to end extreme poverty? So put all that together, and then day one of Charity Water was a party in a nightclub because I just didn't have any better ideas. And I didn't even realize the redemptive turn back then. I was just like, I think I can get a club donated. I know I can get open bar donated. And I'm going to email everyone I know, and I'm turning 31, and everybody likes going to club promoters' birthdays because everybody comes. And that night, 700 people came, and they put $20 in this big box that I had put at the front door. I said, to get in the club, you got to give a $20 donation. And at the end of the night, we'd collected $15,000. We took 100% of it to a refugee camp in northern Uganda, and we built our very first well. And then we sent a team, and they took pictures, and they took video, and they took satellite coordinates, and then we sent the Google Earth satellite images and the photos and the video back to the 700 people who gave $20. And we said, you came, you gave, you were generous. Here's exactly where your money went. And here are the people you helped. Now let's keep doing this. And we really tried to put those principles, the 100% model, proof, building a beautiful, imaginative brand into the DNA of the organization. And that one well has now turned into $171,000. And that, $15,000 has turned into $1 billion now, as millions of everyday people around the world encounter the story, feel like it's not paralyzing, and that they can do something, they can use their resources to impact people's lives in the most tangible way, in the most, apolitical, areligious way. I mean, Republicans and Democrats can actually agree on clean water for humans. An atheist and a Jew and a Mormon and a Muslim and a Christian can all come together and say, in all of our religions, in our non-religion, people need water. They need water to live a good life. And I think, because of the simplicity of that storytelling, of that inarguable common good, we have been able to build a very, very big tent of consensus of millions of people around the world. I've got kids out there that'll do $6.14 lemonade stands and send in their change. And we've had families commit $50 million to help 1 million people get clean water. So all across the spectrum. And at the end of the day, it's water. It's water for people.
One of the things that I love about your story is you didn't come from nonprofit and you didn't say that this is the way that we have to do things. I think that's probably what made you so unique and set you apart.
But almost all entrepreneurs, see some sort of problem or some sort of gap and say, I think I can help solve that problem. Ours just happened to be in the giving space and wanting to reach out to people. In a way, that 70% that doesn't trust charities, or the 42%, they're missing out. I mean, people are missing out by not engaging with great causes, by, you're missing out by not living vicariously through your money as it goes out and impacts human lives. So we wanted to just build a vehicle where people could experience the joy of giving. Simon Sinek has been a long-time friend of mine in the orgs, and he said once in an elevator, he's like, the more people give, the more they give. It's almost like you want to get people addicted to generosity. I was addicted to selfishness. The more I get, the more I want to get. And that just led to a really dark place.
When you look at what you've done right with Charity Water, what do you think? I mean, there's a lot of components into how you've built this into a very successful organization, but compare what you've done outside of the 100%. Compare what you've done with the brand, with the people you engage with, the way that you market. Compare that to traditional nonprofit. And if I think of nonprofit, even growing up, those images of children with like flies around them or whatnot seem to be the go-to marketing strategy for a nonprofit. But now, if I'm thinking about it, I don't remember the last time I've seen an advertisement or a commercial or marketing efforts on behalf of a nonprofit. It seems like all the nonprofit marketing efforts are like fancy dinners or lunches or charity balls or galas, but it still hasn't. Like, I would say I'm not somebody who doesn't trust all nonprofits, but I also believe that some nonprofits have big corporate issues and red tape and don't allocate proceeds properly. I've always felt that to a degree, but it's not because they're a nonprofit. It's because I feel like they're not attracting the talent to build it into an organization that is operationally efficient. And it's not an organization that if I was an investor, I'd want to put money into, because I feel like it's just this bloated, grotesque thing that doesn't seem to want to modernize. So what have you done outside of the 100% donation, that's incredible? What else have you done that is from like a transparency or a marketing standpoint that more nonprofits should look to Charity Water as a role model for?
Yeah, I want to be a little careful here. Our 100% model was right for us. I'm actually not a believer in tiny overheads. There's a guy out there called Dan Pallotta who's given a very famous TED Talk about, I think it's called "The Way We See Charity is Dead Wrong." It's worth checking out for sure. You actually can have, and you alluded to this a little bit in the question, but you can have a nonprofit that hires they have no money to pay their staff. They hire really poor people. They might look efficient, and then all their programs suck. So if they're spending 5 cents on the dollar, on their team and 95 cents on the programs, because the team is so anemically funded or just poor, they're really wasting the 95 cents. So I'm actually not a huge, I don't think people need to adopt the 100% model. It was right for us. 17 years ago or 18 years ago, it continues to be right for us. What I do think charities need to do is be more transparent. And I think people just want to know where their money's going. I mean, this sounds so simple, but it's really hard to know where your money is going when you give to so many nonprofits. And, if I told listeners right now, the biggest need at Charity Water was an Epson copy machine for some reason, and we needed a $650 copy machine, and ours broke, And somehow we were going to use those copies to help save. Like, people would give $650. They would meet a need. You would know where your money's going. Okay, I'm going to buy a copy machine that somehow is going to move the mission forward. Our unique double bank account model, because I have to fund all of the overhead and the staff salaries separately, has helped us, because I went to entrepreneurs and business leaders for that money. And I said to them, look, an organization is only as good as the world-class talent it's able to recruit and then retain. We need to pay people well. We're going to need great benefits. I want to be able to compete with, Google. I can't compete with Google on comp, but I want to get a little closer than the average nonprofit. And then the brand as well, and the purpose. I remember Dan Pink gave a famous talk many years ago about drive. And he said, everybody wants three things. They want autonomy, they want mastery, and they want purpose. So as we think of, building the organization, we've tried to build a world-class, effective, transparent organization. Innovation, I know everybody talks about innovation, but, I could probably, talk for 30 minutes about things we have tried to do that other people have said are really innovative. And some of that is just associating outside the nonprofit norms. Well, I'll give you an example. We made the first virtual reality film in our space. And that was inspired by me going to some demo of Marriott. And Marriott put on a headset on my face, and this is 8 years ago or so, and they took me to a penthouse in Dubai. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. If Marriott can put me high up in the sky in Dubai, I can take you to Ethiopia, to the drilling of a well. And, we very quickly kind of associated, got 8 GoPros donated, built a VR rig, sent out a team to Ethiopia, made this beautiful 8-minute film where a 13-year-old girl named Salam gets clean water for the first time in her life. And people would put on the headset and you see the disgusting water she's drinking. And then you watch these drilling rigs come in and you watch these locals jump out and start putting pipes into the ground. And you see clean water shooting out in the ground in the middle of her village, and people are dancing and, clapping. And her father picks her up and he's spinning her around and tears are streaming. And then on the last day, kind of 8 minutes in, you see her drink clean water for the first time in her life. And because we were so early in that space, we showed that film to tens of thousands of people, and it was the first experience they ever even had in VR. It wasn't a gaming experience. It wasn't a Marriott experience. It was a charity water experience. I remember one guy had given $40,000. He walked into my office, and I was just thanking him for helping 4 communities get clean water. And on his way out, I said, oh, we just made this VR film. Just check it out real quick. It's 8 minutes long, and he sits down, and I put the headset on him. And 8 minutes later, he's got tears streaming down his face. And he pulls out his checkbook, and he says, I haven't done enough. And he writes a $400,000 check on the spot for 40 more communities to get clean water. So, time after time, we have stories where we will see something out there outside the nonprofit world and say, how could we use that technology for good? Whether that's, sensor technology. We've been working on creating smart wells that are connected to the cloud that basically self-report how much clean water is flowing, so that when they break, a mechanic can be dispatched to keep clean water flowing. Well, that was inspired by Nest. I saw a donor change the temperature of their vacation home from a smartphone. I remember just thinking, this is early Internet of Things, 10 years ago. I remember, well, if you can have a smart house, why can't you have a smart well or a smart water pump? And, that led us on many years of R&D. And so I think, innovation and maybe association, how can we do things better? How can we do things more efficiently in the work? We now have 7,000 locals indirectly employed by Charity Water across 21 countries and 59 partner organizations that we've onboarded and vetted and audit. We're always looking for efficiency in the way that we actually deliver clean water through 10 technologies and many different solutions in many different environments. And then we're always looking for ways to innovate in the storytelling. How do I get a listener who woke up today, who's never thought about water. We have a fun idea we're playing with right now called Count Your Taps, which we might turn into a campaign. A guy that worked for me was in Africa, came back, lives in a very modest 3-bedroom home, 1,200 square feet. And after he came back, he counted the taps in his 3-bedroom, 1,200 square foot home where clean water comes out. And he counted 16. And, just a different way of thinking about it, right? You've got your shower, your dishwasher, your garden hose. You've got the washing machine. Every bathroom is a sink, is the toilet, the shower, the bathtub, right? You've got 4 in every bathroom. So I don't know whether we will turn that into a campaign, but we're always just trying to creative. We've done water walks in Times Square where we'll build a giant fashion catwalk, and we'll get sponsors who are willing to pay a little bit of money if someone is willing to pick up 40 or 80 pounds of dirty water and just experience that walk for a moment, to walk in someone else's shoes just for a moment. So that's kind of taking the fashion catwalk idea, recreating it, but saying, what if you were one of the women who had to walk in Malawi or in Bangladesh or in Cambodia? And what if that walk was 7 hours a day? And we'll give somebody a little card that say, great, you just walked 4,821, that's, I don't know how to say that fraction, but you get the idea.
One fraction.
4,000 of the journey that so many women and girls are making every single day. Would you help? Would you help to reduce the walk? And a campaign like that, we will actually quantify hours saved through dollar donations.
I have to take a second and thank the sponsor of today's podcast, LinkedIn. Now, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs isn't just a job board. It helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. And did you know that in a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites? So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. What really amazed me was how quickly I found qualified candidates on LinkedIn. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. It's like hiring professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. As small business owners, we're always juggling multiple responsibilities. LinkedIn understands this and constantly finds ways to make the hiring process easier. They've even launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even quicker. And it's really no wonder why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. I can't recommend it enough for finding top-notch professionals who could take your business to the next level. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/excellence. That's linkedin.com/excellence to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. I feel like a lot of the ways to really make this real is just through like pattern disruption and pattern interruption so that people understand it's not an over there problem. It's when they experience it, even a fraction of it, whether or not it's through VR or walking a couple steps, carrying dirty water and just experiencing what that is, it really makes it real. And I think that's probably the most powerful marketing that you can ever have.
We just shot a PSA, public service announcement over the weekend, and I'm very excited about this one. I'm going to see the first cut in a couple hours. And basically it's a diver. It's an Olympic diver on a platform, the high dive, and it's early morning and she's getting ready to make her dive, and she walks out there, kind of adjusts her bathing suit straps, and begins this beautiful dive. And then the camera pans, and you realize that there's no water in the pool. And right before she breaks her neck, we cut and we say, "Water changes everything. 4,000 kids die every day of bad water. Will you help?" So that's kind of a different way of maybe. I like that you use disrupting, right? We also shot a really fun commercial with a bunch of kids in a slip and slide in a backyard, and the slip and slide had no water, and the kids just go tumbling and saying ouch and oof, and So I think we shot an ad that just had tomato sauce over pasta, brittle pasta. How would your pasta taste without water? How would your Kool-Aid taste if it was just powder in a cup? What would it be like if you were brushing your teeth without water? What if you were an artist and you had an easel and you had watercolors, but no water to mix your paint with? So a lot of this is just exercises in creativity to find that way to bring people into this very human issue affecting 10% of the planet. And then saying, You're in the 90%. Would you consider helping? Would you consider joining us on this noble mission to make sure every human has clean water to drink?
Now, this journey, it's not just been all up and to the right. You've had difficulties too. I mean, at one point you almost went bankrupt. Talk me through, because this, again, when you innovate, you're going to have to solve things that people have never solved before, or this particular business model is not the way it's always been done, which ended up working, but going to be tons of growing pains in the process. So talk me through some of the difficulties, the hurdles, the shit hitting the fan moments that you had to go through when you're building out Charity Water.
I mean, I think the biggest one is, one of the early ones was grinding to a halt because we couldn't raise the overhead money as fast as we were raising the water money. It turned out the 100% model is very compelling. If I give a donor two choices, hey, do you want 100% of your money to go straight to the field and build a water project that you can see getting a satellite image and photos of? Or would you like to pay for a staff salary and accounting, right? I mean, we know where the money was headed. So it took a lot of really creative storytelling and finding the right people, the builders, the entrepreneurs, the business leaders who saw the value in, John's job in accounting and how important that would be to to building a world-class organization that would eventually impact, hundreds of millions of lives on the planet. So yeah, we almost went bankrupt, and, we almost ran out of cash. And there's a story in the book where, that I wrote about, where this stranger walks in at that existential moment of insolvency and writes $1 million check and says, I love your idea, you just need more time, and gave us more rope, more runway. And we're able to steward that extra year of OpEx capital and actually build out what's now a program where 130 and growing families and entrepreneurs pay all the overhead so that millions of people can give in a pure way. And we call that program The Well, and it's multi-year and multi-tier, and it's international, and we do events and we treat them like shareholders or LPs. So it's become sophisticated, but it almost didn't work. We built a really cool platform that allowed people to donate their birthdays to Charity Water. And we wound up raising over $100 million as people effectively crowdfunded for us. And then we realized nobody would do it again. So it was all kind of a one-time donation business that we built, and people would only do one birthday. They'd have a great experience, but they'd never come back. And, we wound up having a down year and kind of having to kill the engine that drove growth for the first 8 years and completely reinvent a new engine, which was a subscription engine, much more of the Spotify or Netflix or Disney Plus model.
That's the spring.
That's called the spring. And we had a couple of years of kind of down years while we were building that then wound up tripling the size of the organization. But it felt bad for a couple of years. When you're killing the thing that got you there, you got to completely reinvent and reimagine something new. You're not sure it's going to work. In our case, it did, and we were fortunate. But, oh my gosh, challenges. I mean, I hired a president 6 months ago, and, she basically said, your CRM's a mess. I said, well, yeah, we never really had the time to invest millions of dollars in, great data management and great CRM. We were always putting that money in the field or hiring the next, marketing person. So, there are myriad challenges that come with, you're always fighting for resources, and it's really hard. I mean, my wife, kind of knows. I joke that there's not a day in my life in the last 18 years where I'm not asking someone for money. In some ways, you're not in control of your own destiny. We are the guide in the hero's journey. You're the hero, right? You're the hero. We're just the guide saying, you want to be generous? You want to make your money work in the world? We have this vehicle that we've created that can help you do that. But if there's no heroes, there's no money. We're just sitting on our hands, waiting for somebody who wants to take that step. And I think, sometimes I'm jealous of my friends who feel a little more like masters of their own destiny because they're selling a physical product, or they're selling software, or they're building something that people are buying, and they need to sell more widgets, or they need to sell more software. I'm selling an idea of generosity. I'm selling an idea of clean water. And, you hear no a lot. It sucks. It sucks to hear no.
But I mean, you're selling an idea, but I think that a lot of people, listen, at the end of the day, everyone's selling an idea, but the way that you've built a process that accomplishes an objective, yes, you're selling an idea, but I do believe that people are inherently altruistic and inherently do want to give back. I think what you've done very, very well is you've just bridged that trust gap. That I know you hear no a lot, but I think that bridging that trust gap is probably the most useful lesson that somebody can take away who's trying to build a nonprofit or even just build a company. I think that if you applied the framework and the trust gap that you've deployed in Charity Water, I think that would help most companies.
Yeah, I think that's true. Trust is a really big, and you get opportunities all the time to compromise and to compromise your integrity or play in the gray. And, that has been, I think, one of the things I'm most proud of is just, I see the world in so black and white, and maybe not as surprised with the extreme changes in my life, but, at that moment of insolvency, it was interesting. We had $880,000 in the water bank account. It was more than 8 months of operating capital. We could have borrowed from that. We could have written an IOU. We could have said, our money's fungible. I was going to shut down the organization rather than borrow 1 penny of the public's money because we'd promised that all of it would go straight to projects. So I was calling lawyers at that moment, this is the second year of Charity Water, saying, how do you unwind a 501c3? Because I don't have enough money to run the overhead side. But I intuitively knew that if we dipped even 1 penny into that public bank account, there would be a crack at the core of the foundation. There would be a crack in our integrity. And I didn't want to work at a place like that. I would rather, shut the organization down and try again, or try with the traditional business model. And, we were very fortunate at that moment to have somebody walk in and kind of save the day for us. But I would have been willing to, take, I guess, the high ground, make good on our promise, and walk away with integrity intact and maybe no organization.
You keep mentioning that resources are constrained in a charity or nonprofit, and you're always thinking about how do I get the most out of the operational expense and the most out of the money that I do have. You've built a massive brand, over $1 billion raised. There has to be a lesson in there for the people that you attract into the organization, because I think that companies with budgets 2x and 3x what you have a tough time attracting people that are sort of on for the ride and on for the mission. So when you look at the president you hire all the way down to, Joe in accounting or the latest marketer you just brought on, what's the secret to getting people that are really willing to go above and beyond for the company and the mission?
Brand is really important, and ambition, I think, is really important. We hired 36 people last year. We had 16,500 full applicants for those 36 jobs. I think it's 10 times harder to get into Charity Water than Stanford or MIT or Harvard. And that, I think, is because people also want to work with purpose. So I think we're also just tapping into a little bit of a zeitgeist where people say, I want my work to matter. Maybe more people are realizing what I came to realize without the 10 years going down that path. I mean, we have people applying to Charity Water as their very first job, exiting college, exiting, a master's program, and saying, I want to dedicate my life, and great, if I can make an income that helps me to support my family, I'm happy to do it over here and make and trade that financial success and trade, the vacation house or the boats or the planes or those aspirations for work that matters, for work that benefits other humans.
As you scale, I mean, again, over $1 billion raised, obviously your impact is huge now. What are some of the biggest hurdles that you find yourself encountering now that you're still struggling with? Maybe you don't have an answer for in terms of global access to clean water, global access to resources that you're trying to figure out that you just wish more people would be aware of.
It's interesting. $1 billion is a fraction of what I thought we would have raised by now.
That is interesting.
When we hit that mark, it's funny. My wife was with me that day. It was actually our 15th anniversary, and I called one of my business coaches. I felt nothing. I felt no sense of satisfaction, really. I can't believe it took 18 years. I mean, it's water. It's water for humans. There are resources out there. 100 million people give $1. It's $100 million, right? When you really think about it, we have not cracked the code at all. So this is a fraction of what I'd imagined. I can't believe it took us so long to reach this milestone. So for us, the billion correlates roughly with 20 million people who now have clean water because of charity water. You put 20 million into 700 million people, it's like 1/36th. I didn't set out to solve 1/36th of the current global problem, 2.5%. So, to me, it really feels like we better be in the second inning of the game. I mean, this better be the top of the second where, we scored a run and it's 1-0. And I'm hoping we have a 10-run game, a 50-run game, at the end, because we're really batting for 700 million people out there to get access to clean water. So it's really a resource.
So the issues are not even in the countries. The issues are at home.
I could do, an order of magnitude more work and deliver more clean water to people than we have the money for. The infrastructure has been built out ahead of, any current levels of funding. So, that's why I'm out there, 90 flights a year. I'm talking to students. I'm talking to corporations. I'm talking to billionaires. I'm talking to, first graders and handing out lemonade kits and piggy banks, right? It's really trying to build a movement of people to engage with this issue, educate them on the issue, and then have them raise their hand and say, not on my watch. Like, not on my watch. I don't want to live in a world where we might actually find water on Mars 142 million miles away before we find water for humans on Earth. And before we have the human will to get that done. And here in America, we printed $1 trillion a couple times. You can give everybody clean water for about 15 cents of the dollar of one of those stimulus bills. So it's really about moving and unlocking the resources. It is the last thing I would say about it. We know definitively how to bring every human being on Earth clean water. We have the cure. We don't need to do research in a lab. We're not trying to find the cure for ALS or Parkinson's or late-stage pancreatic cancer. We have the cure for water, but we have not implemented it. We haven't built the global will. We haven't built the movement. So I can't tell you how frustrating that is sometimes to know that there are people that I visit with, communities I visit, they don't need to be drinking dirty water. No one needs to drink dirty water. And yet I haven't convinced enough people yet to share their resources to engage in this. So I think I'm driven by that idea of, we have done a fraction of what's needed and a fraction of what I'd imagined our impact would be. So $1 billion might sound like a lot to a small nonprofit. It's so much less than I imagined. 20 million people with water. Yeah, great. It fills up Madison Square Garden like 1,300 times. Great. We've sold out the garden. That's so much less than I thought we would have accomplished in almost 2 decades.
I would ask why you think that is, but I think it's probably just a little bit of selfishness and lack of awareness. I mean, I can't think.
It's hard to get people to care about an issue that doesn't affect them. So it's really hard to get people to care about an issue that they've never experienced. And that's why the storytelling and the immersive storytelling and the creativity is so important.
If you gave everyone on Earth access to clean drinking water, just to paint a picture of people that are listening, what would the downline effects of that be?
Oh my gosh. Education improves. So many girls drop out of school because the school has no water and they've got to go walk. So you're educating generations of young girls. Women would get, remember when I started, the stat was 40 billion hours back just in Africa. You just take one continent. and this is a problem in Africa and India and Southeast Asia and Central and South America, but women get, imagine being a woman who's walking 7 hours a day for dirty water, 7 days a week. And then one day you walk 0. You walk out your front door and you walk a minute. Imagine what you would do with 49 reclaimed hours in an instant. And we know what women do. They start small businesses. They sell things at the market. They start bakery businesses. They earn income. They use that money to pay for school fees and to buy school uniforms for their kids. They improve their houses. They put roofs on their houses. They build their families. So water impacts health. In some of these countries, 50% of the disease starts with water. 50% of this, you could walk into a country and provide everybody with clean water and cut the hospital in half. Just empty half of the hospital beds and say, go home. You're here because you drank dirty water. So there's health, education, time back, dignity for women and girls, local economy. There's a 90-page paper that came out of the UN that tracked the economic benefit of water. Every dollar invested makes these communities 4 to 8 times richer. So all of the, I love downline. Yes, all of these downline benefits. And, to somebody listening, just contemplate for a second, like how radically different your life would be without clean water. It would be unrecognizable from the life you have today.
I don't think many people could handle walking 7 hours a day for clean water. It's a necessity to figure it out, but how radically altered their life would be, I just don't even think they can compute. It's almost so, it's so different from what everybody experiences right now. It's hard to really understand what that life is like.
And that's our job. That's the job of Charity Water, is to try to bring that to life and create compassion and empathy, and then get people to open up their hearts.
What can people do? You've built this incredible organization. People want to get involved. How can they help? How can they support?
Yeah, I mentioned the spring earlier. That's one really easy way. So they could go to thespring.com. There's also a video there that's gotten over 100 million views across platforms. It's a great way to share our story with some of the visuals. It talks about the 100% model and what water means for these communities. And that's kind of, most people have, I think the average American has 12 subscriptions these days. So, we're saying this is a subscription where we give you no music, we give you no movies, no TV, no magazine articles to read, but 100% of whatever you can give every month goes directly to help people get water. So the spring, I really think, is the future. Imagine if we had 1 million people giving $40 every single month. That's 1 million people that would get clean water every single month. So I'm really, I love that. There might be some people listening that say, I've had a good year. I could give 10 grand and knock out an entire community. Charity Water has an awesome process for that. You could pick the country, you can sponsor that project. We report back to you on the progress in construction and show you when it's built. So maybe people listening could do that. And maybe somebody rang the bell and wants to help us with the overhead. So yeah, I'm easy to find in that case. That's kind of the biggest challenge, but really a necessary one to continue to find people who believe in really kind of the most sacrificial way of giving. You don't get your name on a well, but you do get to build an organization and the impact. So, charitywater.org, a lot of stuff is on our website, but, of course, if anybody is compelled to learn more about this issue or to get involved, or, we started something called The Tributary a couple of years ago where people started including us in their wills and, have seen some estate gifts now come in that have really transformed people's lives. So there's all these different ways to help. It's really just getting people to say, man, I think I could stand for clean water.
It shouldn't be hard to get people to say that. We'll put all these links in the show notes. Before we wrap up, is there something that I should have asked you, some lesson or a piece of wisdom that we didn't go into that you'd like to leave the audience with? Sometimes I ask, like a lesson you tell your younger self after going through all these seasons, but it doesn't have to be.
I wouldn't have listened. If I told my younger self anything, I wouldn't have listened. Look, I think what I've found is, through service, there is a real freedom. If you wake up and you ask yourself, how can I help? How can I use what I've been blessed with to bless others, to improve the lives of others here in my local community, in the global community? It's really worth doing. I remember coming across a saying once that said, do not be afraid of work that has no end. And this kind of idea of endless toil. And I really think about that. If you're positioning your life towards service and generosity, you've never done enough. There's no drop the mic moment. But the more you do, and then one day you get to look back and say, wow, I've actually made an extraordinary impact. It's funny, I get to show donors often their reports, like 5 years in Charity Water, and almost everyone looks at the report and said, I gave that much? Right? Because it feels good. Like I was that generous because they just got in the act of doing it. Again, somebody signs up for $40 a month and 8 years later, you're like, here's how much you've given. I gave that much? I didn't even notice that $40 coming out of my bank account next to HBO Max So I think that's, I love that idea of kind of endless work in the pursuit of others.